Hello, and welcome to our Lunar Reflections podcast, where we'll be journeying with the moon while Jupiter is in Cancer. Each month, we'll release an episode to coincide with the new moon, and today's episode is the moon in Pisces. And we're really excited to have Ty as our guest astrologer today. Hi, Ty. Welcome to our podcast, and thank you for joining. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, y'all. I'm Ty. I'm a professional astrologer. I've been studying astrology for about 10 years now, but I've had my practice for about 7, 8 years now. I absolutely love it. I love being able to help people track patterns, track, timing and events in their life. And yeah, that's how I love to use astrology, and I'm super excited to dive into all things Pisces Moon today. So thanks y'all for having me. Super excited.
Yay. No, that's great. I'm looking forward to diving into that. But before we talk about the new moon specifically, I thought we maybe could briefly touch upon the Virgo eclipse that we had last week. 'Cause I see this new moon as like the official end to eclipse season, but also a continuation of that eclipse story at the same time. And we still have also that final Pisces eclipse in August. So how have you both experienced this eclipse season? What about you, Ty?
Oh, good question. It's been kind of a whirlwind, like quite exhausting for me. How everything kind of started around, I know the eclipse season started in 2026, but my journey actually started like November 2025. That's when I really started feeling everything amp up for me. And I'm Pisces Moon. I'm a Virgo Sun, Virgo rising, and so all of my angles are mutable. So for me, my
Mm.
big story was about figuring out, where am I going to move? Where am I going to live? Where am I going to settle abroad? Funny enough. And also I had to unfortunately go back to the US to get a new passport. So it's been very stressful. I just got back to where I am now in Southeast Asia. So it was like very stressful. Everything was like up in the air, very unclear for me when I was going to
Mm.
come back, how everything was going to go. So I'm just glad to now be taking a like deep breath and to finally be exiting eclipse season
Yeah.
officially. Thank God.
Yeah, well, that sounds like some major transitions for you. And I think this kind of highlights when you have eclipses in the angular houses, how they just are so loud, like there's no kind of hiding from it. And it's almost like
hmm
it's almost like you've got to just go with it rather than try and fight against it. It can be difficult. So yeah, these eclipses, yeah, they've been in my second and eighth houses. I don't have anything in Pisces. I have a Virgo Venus, and South Node has just been doing its thing on my Venus. And it's interesting because I know we look at the second house as like the money house, but I have actually been looking about how my self-worth in relation to relationships, how I show up in relationships has definitely been a eclipse theme, which has been continuing. And it'll be interesting when they actually move into Leo and Aquarius, because that will be my angular houses. So it's almost feel like it's setting up, teeing up for the next chapter. What about you,
Mm.
Helen?
Yeah, just was thinking there, probably the 2025 eclipse had a bigger impact because it was squaring my nodes in the late degrees of mutable signs. But this most recent one, I think, is in my ninth whole sign house, and it's been, I think I would connect it mostly to the work I've been doing, the astrology studies that I've been doing, because I've sort of
Mm.
changed tack, not changed tack, but I like to like combine different approaches. So I've been studying for I'm a diploma in psychological astrology, having started out more in the Hellenistic side, and so I'm looking to build a synthesis. And long story short, I've ended up in a deep dive into kind of Jungian psychology and modern consciousness studies, and that kind of metaphysical side of things has been where my mind has been at quite a lot of the time. And so I guess that's fairly mutable, but also very ninth housey, and a
Yeah.
little bit ungrounded for me because I'm a kind of Capricorn rising and Aries sun. I tend to like to be, quite rooted and action oriented. So it's definitely felt like the start of a really interesting direction for me. as well.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting how we kind of experience them in slightly different ways depending on what it kind of touches upon in the natal chart. It's all very
Yeah.
personal, isn't it?
Yeah,
As well
absolutely.
as collective in a way as well. Like we're all collectively feeling it, but in slightly different ways. And
Mhm.
I think it's been interesting that these last few years there's been like that overlap where we have like the final set of eclipses before the nodes move into the new signs, if that makes sense. We had that first Aquarius eclipse, but they haven't moved into Aquarius yet. So it's almost like a
Mhm.
precursor, and then you have like these overlapping themes, which I think has, yeah, made things maybe a little bit more complex. It's not as straightforward because you're kind of dovetailing between different houses. But moving on to this new moon, which is at 28 degrees, I've kind of observed that what's interesting about these new moons happening at the end of the season is almost like we've experienced Pisces season. We're almost on the threshold of Aries, but then we have this new moon. And you mentioned earlier, Ty, about the stellium, which is like super interesting with Mars and the North Node there. But I think what's even more interesting is not only is it this stellium being ruled by Jupiter in Cancer, which is kind
Right.
of making this, it's like a main character, it's making that lovely trine. I think it gives the stellium this kind of anchor because I don't know, I was like looking at the chart and I was thinking, gosh, all those kind of Pisces planets can feel ungrounded at times, but it feels like that Jupiter in Cancer is kind of anchoring it instead of letting it kind of drift. And it's interesting that Jupiter went direct March 11th, so just last week, like 5 days ago. Um,
Mhm.
and then also you've got this averse Aries stellium, and it's interesting because you've got the 28-degree moon kind of conjunct to this Saturn and Neptune that's just kind of moved into Aries. So you've got,
Mhm.
I don't know, it feels like a blind spot, but the absence is their presence. And I keep just zoning back to that Aries stellium and thinking, what's the story there in terms of this Pisces new moon? It's almost like there's a spiritual threshold, like one foot in the
Mhm.
fog, one foot in the light, and
Yeah.
there's this, yeah. So I don't know what you
Yeah.
think.
I think that definitely applies, especially on a more personal and energetic level. But what I'm really noticing and looking at here is in relation to like what's going on in the world right now, especially. I'm very interested to see how this new moon, especially, excuse me, is going to impact um, costs because we have Venus involved here, especially in regards to Mars is the ruler here of Aries, and so Mars in Pisces, so the cost of
Mhm.
oil, right? Like that's this big conversation, especially that's been going on right now. And we have Mars connected to Mercury retrograde. So I'm very, very interested to see what the outcome will be. Obviously, it's not. I find it interesting that you said like that there's this anchor with Jupiter because right now it seems there hasn't been much diplomacy. Maybe with this new moon there will actually be talks, like there will actually be conversations rather than the violence
Mhm.
um that we've been seeing. And I also wonder how that's going to, impact travel as well. A lot of people have been stuck here in Thailand, here, I
Mhm.
mean, there in the Middle East, Dubai. A lot of people are trying to get back home, trying to get to the West. So I definitely see that, being a factor as well with this new moon.
Yeah, no, you've made some really good points there. And I think Saturn being a part of that Aries stellium, while it's averse, it's still having an influence.
Hmm.
And that I feel like there's something around dissolving old structures. And I feel like this is a really important kind of threshold that we're on, like you said, on a collective rather than just this personal, or how is this gonna affect me? Helen, what do you think? Because I know that this stellium's really having a, big impact at the moment.
Yeah, huge. I mean, I want to come back to what you were both just saying there because I had some quite similar thoughts. I mean, the first high level thing I thought, you know, I think you were touching on it as well earlier, Tara. We're in this seasonal
Hmm.
zone where we tip from Pisces into Aries, and most of the planets, like I think 6 out of 7 of the traditional planets on this new moon are in Pisces and Aries. So there's almost like a exaggeration of that kind of feeling of we're in this tipping point going into a new cycle, and obviously with the new moon enhancing that. And I'd looked as well, the Mercury Mars on the node is picking up the square from Jupiter, its ruler, and so Like you, Ty, I was wondering, how's that going to go? Is that, because Jupiter can add that sense of justice and diplomacy. Sometimes it can exaggerate Mars, the worst tendencies of Mars as well. So we kind of have
Yes.
to, it's like you say, there's everything to do with, communications from what we've seen already have been very confusing. And so I don't know
I
whether with
know, yeah.
Mercury's still retrograde, whether that's, going to start to clear then. But then again, as you were saying, Tara, there's that Saturn Neptune dynamic, which is conjunct by degree with the new moon, and separating. So, we may be hoping that we're starting to come through some of the fog and into the new, more concrete. And something else I picked up was that that last couple of degrees of Pisces are the term rulership of Saturn. And so, and with Saturn in detriment and, widely conjunct the new moon itself, I'm wondering if there's maybe a tension there between kind of the Piscean scope for imagination and creativity and the grounding and our practical needs as an individual, and almost like what came to mind for me was something around finding a balance between sort of dreaming of a better future, which I think, despite everything, many people are just now, and accepting reality as best we can discern it through the fog, so that we can
Yeah.
start to work towards the future. And I think that was the kind of the most hopeful notes I was sort of picking up from this chart.
I love
Yeah,
that. That
no.
was really beautiful. No,
Oh,
I was just
was
saying
you
that
going to
was
say more?
absolutely beautiful delineation for sure. I definitely see that, like you said, Helen, like looking to a brighter, better future for us all, but also being in a state of the sobering reality of what
Mm.
is. But it's kind of paradoxical in a way because it's like we're dealing with this sobering reality, but it's also unclear what exactly that reality is and what's happening, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it feels like a literal just representation of what we can see in the chart. And I think it's not lost on me that not only are we at that threshold between one cycle and the next in terms of like Pisces and Aries, we've got that spring equinox and we've got Mercury
Mhm.
stationary in direct. So it does feel like we're coming out of the fog, but we don't quite know what we're going into. And
Mhm.
looking, I don't know why for some reason this chart I just got pulled in. I don't know if it's just like the Pisces energy. I just kept looking at it, and what you said, Helen, about all of those planets being just concentrated in Pisces and Aries, I kind of got drawn not only to Jupiter but Uranus and Pluto on like either end of that whole continuum, and what's Uranus and Pluto having to say about this, because you've got late degree Uranus, it's about to move into Gemini, so it is making that aspect to Pluto. And I think that also has an undertone in terms of like expect the unexpected still, people in power, control, all of that kind of seals this whole narrative. I just think it's interesting that we're having this new moon just as we're kind of in that liminal space of the spring equinox as well.
Yeah, that new moon is almost, well, not quite, but it's near the midpoint of that developing air trine between Uranus and Pluto,
Mhm.
which I think we're expecting, uh, probably some speeding up of the change around AI, and there's probably other surprising technological dimensions of it. So yeah, I think maybe you're seeing the seeds.
We've been on AstroSeek recently, and for listeners, if you've been on, you've probably seen the same thing where, there's these AI bots that are kind of swarming the internet and having to protect people's data. And, there's a lot going on in terms of like AI. So I think you're right in terms of that air trine. It's an interesting chart for sure.
And another thing that popped out at me actually as well was just on the central dignity of it. I feel like almost Jupiter's got quite a lot to kind of try and balance out, because we've got
Mm,
obviously Mercury in fall and in detriment, Venus in detriment, Saturn in fall, conjunct each other, tied up with this lunation, and then Mercury's also retrograde, just to enhance that, whereas Jupiter's sitting exalted
mhm.
locally, it's ruling the ascendant, which is in Sagittarius in the UK, as well as the new moon, and yet it's got quite a lot to almost kind of counter for.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I picked up that in the UK. I'm not sure what it is, the chart that you're looking at, Ty, in where you are, but yeah, it's a Sagittarius rising chart. So obviously Jupiter is that chart ruler, and as with all new moon charts, you have the lot of fortune conjunct the ascendant, which I always think is super interesting. That's the standard kind of setup where we've got that lot of fortune. And actually, in this chart, it's down to the second on the ascendant, so it's really tightly aspected. So it definitely has that karmic kind of undertone as well.
Yeah, I think the lot of fortune on the ascendant with the exact new moon, it does sort of maybe direct us to think about what's on the horizon, what's on the eastern horizon in terms of that almost that fated element of that a lot of fortune signifies. So I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So having touched on the forthcoming lunation, coming back to kind of the moon in Pisces more generally, Sai, we understand you've got a natal Pisces moon, and I was wondering if you could say a bit about that and what's been your lived experience with that placement.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to start off, for those of you who may not know, so Pisces is a mutable sign. It's considered to be feminine. It is a water sign specifically. If we talk about the quality of Pisces, moist, nocturnal, it's the 12th zodiac sign. And in terms of essential dignity, it's exalted in Venus. And we can find Pisces in its fall and Mercury. So just a little bit about Pisces. Now, so I'm a Pisces moon. I have kind of a love hate kind of dynamic with my Pisces moon, and I think that I attest that to the fact that I'm also Virgo sun, Virgo rising, right? So I have my ascendant and my natal sun opposite my moon. It's a bit weird in the sense that, especially growing up for me, it was challenging because there was a lot that I was unaware of that I was quickly made aware of by my peers growing up. So I dealt with bullying, for being different, being out of the ordinary, kind of like really creative, wacky. Like I was the kid that was wearing mismatch socks to school, crazy colors in my hair, just very creative, but I was also, and still am, very empathetic, very in tune with what's going on around me. I think that that's one of the qualities just with Pisces, generally speaking, but especially with Pisces moons that I found and that I've experienced myself as well. Pisces actually rules the feet. I was a dancer. And a swimmer my entire childhood, funny enough. So I'm like Pisces stereotype, very good with my feet for sure. And I think the only other thing I would say just generally to start off with my Pisces moon, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and that's something that I didn't notice until recently with Jupiter being in Cancer and having that mutual reception. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But that is something that I realized, like, and especially my Pisces moon is in my seventh house, which is a public, like, and how other people are able to see and interact with you. And so, yeah, very much like can't hide what I'm feeling. You can see it all over my face. Like if I'm angry, you can definitely see it on my face. If I'm sad, you can see it. So I think that's another thing, especially with having my Pisces moon in such a visible house, is that it's really difficult for me, even when I'm not consciously aware of it, to hide what I truly feel and what I'm truly thinking. So yeah.
That's really interesting. I think it's really interesting when you have such personal planets in sister signs, because not only are you pulled in different directions via the house topics, but by how the signs approach things. And obviously
Mhm.
Virgo can be very methodical, very analytical, very like structured, and then which is complete opposite to like how Pisces tends to operate. How
Right.
do you, how have you kind of reconciled that difficulty in terms of like opposing each other?
I don't even know what's going on like 90% of the time, but it's fine. Like we're just figuring it out as we go.
Yeah.
No, really though, I think the biggest balance for me, because Virgo is earth, very grounding, Pisces is water. And not only that, like Pisces is very much one foot in the like physical world, one foot in the spiritual world, at least in my opinion. And I know Valens, I believe, also kind of attributes Pisces to that too, being in the material and spiritual. So
Mhm.
for me, it's about having balance. So, you know, I have like my workout routines, my journaling routines. I'm very like organized, you know, like I have everything all together, but I'm very spiritual as well, you know. I make sure I have my ancestral altar, that I tend to it. Like I don't feel right when I'm not, you know, tending to it, or meditating, or just having practices that kind of give me an escape almost from
Mhm.
that grounding, from like just the responsibilities of the physical world. Like I have to have that dual kind of nature with having, you know, both of the sister signs, especially in my big three.
I love that. And that was actually really close to the question that came to my mind as well, because when I was reflecting on Pisces before we came in here, I was thinking about that contrast between, before I knew you were a Virgo as well, I was thinking about that contrast between kind of Mercury, with its kind of left-brained, analytical, detail, information oriented, versus Jupiter, and it's got that big picture, kind of taking in the field, and really, you know, open-minded, more meaning related kind of thought. And so I was kind of curious on how it sounds like you started to cover that, in terms of, it sounds like you've found a good degree of integration. But do you ever find that you kind of oscillate between the two a bit, or do you find that you might get ideals of one or the other projected onto you by people that you interact with, for example?
Mhm. Yeah, that's actually a really good question, especially because my moon is square Pluto, my natal Pluto, and it's like a 2-degree orc. They're separating, but one thing that I will say about it is that I operate in extremes. Usually, like when I have balance, that's a really, really good thing. And I know that you guys know that, especially with Pluto's energy. It's hard to stay balanced. I have to take extra time, extra effort, extra, like I have to be extremely intentional about it. And I've learned that when I'm not being intentional in my life, it is definitely reflected like through those extremes. And I also think like having, you know, my moon square Pluto, in addition to that, it's also square my midheaven too. So it shows up through my work. It shows up through my goals, my focus, like my overarching focus. I can lose track very, very easily and kind of like get into a daze where I'm just like waking up and I do my routines, but I'm not really working towards anything. And I think that that can be the tricky thing with Pisces, number one, but also
Mhm.
with me in particular, being a Pisces moon, having it square Pluto and having it square my midheaven as well. So yeah, to answer your question, it's really difficult sometimes, a lot of times. But as I get older, I, you know, am figuring it out more and more.
Yeah, because that's quite a strong grand cross. Then you've got a mutual kind
Yes.
of grand cross going
Hmm.
on. Yeah,
I
which
do.
is
Hmm.
yeah, which is super interesting. It being mutable, because that grand cross is almost the tension between all four kind of keeps them stuck, but yet you've got that mutability, which must feel yeah quite interesting. And before we move on, sorry, because I'm just really interested, is having a moon in the seventh house, especially such an empathetic open moon, do you
Hmm.
have to kind of protect yourself against other people's energies in terms of like picking that up in that seventh house? I can imagine that can feel quite full on sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. My solution is actually quite funny. I smoke a joint every morning. Works like a charm. You know, I don't feel everyone else's stuff. I'm like very much just in my own world, like once I've done that. So that's like
Yeah.
kind of my ritual and routine. Like I wake up in the morning, I, you know, pray or, you know, go to my ancestral altar and whatnot, do some meditation, smoke a joint, and then I'm ready to start my day. If I don't do all of those things, like
Hmm.
I'm like a monster. Like it's horrible. It's like the worst thing ever. So I
Yeah.
have to, you know,
That
do
sounds
that
like
for
a
sure.
really nice ritual, morning ritual, and it's self-preservation and protection, isn't it? Because I think when you have
Absolutely.
moon in a angular house, especially, you're just much more open to other
Hmm.
people's energies. So it's great that
Hmm.
you've got I love that routine. Um so I guess this kind of moves us on to the next part, which was around stereotypes or misconceptions that you'd like to challenge about moon in Pisces.
Oh yeah, that is you know, there's so many misconceptions, and I feel like this is a thing with all the water signs. We can start with the fact that people tend to associate water signs with emotional, and when we say emotional, more like crying, you know, sad, whiny, baby-like, childlike. So I want to start off by saying Pisces in general, but especially Pisces moons, are not crybabies. We're fucking scary. I don't know if I can curse on here. Bleep it out if I can. But like we're like absolutely scary. Think about when I talk about Pisces and I break it down for people who don't quite understand astrology, I tell people it is like the deep ocean. Really, like you can associate Pisces with that, in fact.
Mm.
What about the deep ocean do we not know? We don't know so much about it. Like it's so vast, it's so deep. And so when you think about the emotional capacity or emotional expression of Pisces, emotional does not mean whiny. It means that we have intense emotions. That intensity could be joy, it could be anger, it could be grief, especially grief. With Pisces are always mourning something. We're very nostalgic kind of like people as well. So we do we're a little bit more familiar with like those more intense emotions. But we're not crybabies, but yes, we can be overpowering with our emotional capacity. But think about, you know, our daddy Jupiter. He's quite big and expansive as well. So I think that that makes perfect sense that, you know, Pisces moons can also be that way. But yeah, we can be scary too. You know, when we're angry, we could blow up. You know, when we're sad, it could feel like, you know, torrential rain is like crashing down through whatever location that we're at. I think that we make sure that everyone in the room can feel what we are feeling for sure. So, I think another thing too, misconception that people have about Pisces is that we are kind of dazed or like confused or just lost, or we're not. I think it's more so that Pisces energy is processing a lot. Exactly what you said, Tara. We're processing so much, especially
Mhm.
subconsciously without realizing it. I've talked about like the subconscious a lot so far because I do tend to associate Pisces. I think it's a little bit more the 12th house, but I do, you know, at times associate Pisces with the subconscious as well. So because Pisces is in its fall in Mercury, we do have to be a little bit more intentional as Pisces people about how we process information, how we choose to share information. Um, I use like Albert Einstein as an example for that. He actually like did not do well in school in his younger years at all. His teachers really didn't think he was going to amount to be anything, and I think that that's because I know he had his Mercury in Pisces, but people wanted him to learn in a traditional way,
Mm.
whereas Pisces energy is quite abstract. You know, we have to do things in our way. We have to have that balance between the physical and the metaphysical or the spiritual or whatever you have it. So, yeah, I know I said a lot there, but yeah, I definitely think that people have a lot of misconceptions about, you know, Pisces, whereas it is just this deep, vast energy that's constantly being peeled back layer by layer by layer, just like we're constantly discovering more about the ocean. We're also always discovering more about Jupiter as well. You know, we used to think that Jupiter was made of gas. That's like not true. The top layer of Jupiter is actually gas. But as you move further into the atmosphere of Jupiter, because of the pressure and the heat, the hydrogen gas, it transitions to a liquid state. So there is liquid on
I love
Jupiter. So
this.
I think that's really cool because I like really
Yeah.
associate that with Pisces as well. And that liquid is actually metallic hydrogen. So it's not like regular liquid that we perceive, you know, like on Earth.
Hmm.
It's more like it would be like poisonous to us, in fact. And I think Pisces could talk about that too. Poison, substances,
Mm.
oil, you know, things like that. So yeah, that's what I have to say about the misconceptions and stereotypes on Pisces.
I really like that. I love what you've said. There's so much that you've said that is just super interesting. As a scientist, I'm geeking out on like Jupiter's properties. Like that sounds very interesting, but also very reflective of Piscean nature. In terms of, I love what you said about the word abstract. I think that's actually a much better word to explain. You know, when people are like, oh, they can be delusional, their head's in the clouds, they don't really know what's going on. But actually, the abstractness of it is beautiful, and it's a way in which you can not just be fixated on one thing. I think that's such a lovely way to look at it, and I think you've really addressed some of those misconceptions in a really grounded way. I think your Virgo still comes through even when you're speaking and explaining it in a very clear way. And I think even that link to Albert Einstein having his Mercury in Pisces, but look at,
I
look
believe
at the
it's
things.
Mercury and Pisces. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. It
Okay.
might be a different planet. I believe it's
Yeah,
his
but something.
Mercury
He's
though.
got something in
Yeah,
Pisces. Yeah.
yeah.
And but what he was able to put out was very concrete, very structured, very able to kind of follow it. And I think, yeah, the crybaby trope is just so old with all the water signs. I mean,
I know.
it happens it happens with all of them. Interestingly, I mean, I'm an only child, but I grew up with a cousin that was like a sister, and she was a Pisces moon. And yes, while she did cry, but she also had just she had such an amazing, like, what she's turned out to be and what she's done has just been incredibly um impressive, actually. I mean, she's now a Baptist minister, and her empathy and compassion for people is just, yeah, I'm always in awe of people who are able to give to others in that way. And I think Pisces is just kind of endless how much they can give. And I think that
That's
that
such a good
Jupiter is just,
point.
yeah,
Yeah,
it just
absolutely.
never
That's such a good
stops.
point that you bring up because like especially a lot of times you can see like healers, people who go and volunteer or do philanthropy as well with very strong Piscean notes in their chart. So exactly what you said. But at the same time, because of that boundary, how do you put it? Like it's like this boundarylessness. That's not a word, but
Mm.
I just made it up. It's fine. Um, and I really feel like sometimes that can be Pisces detriment at times, is
Yeah.
not having those clear
Hmm.
boundaries, whether it's with the people in our lives or our creative process. Like I used to be like that, even with my astrology practice where I would like stay up until like 4 a.m. just like typing charts, like not having good boundaries, not eating the entire day, like just because I'm working so hard and pouring my all and I want to give so much to everyone that I end up taking away from
Hmm.
my own basic needs. So that's a really lovely point that you bring up is that, Pisces can be so giving and especially Moon in Pisces can be so nourishing to others. But there has to be boundaries, definitely, for sure.
And definitely, just before we move on, because that's something that really struck me before and came through in what you were both saying, so that confirms it, is that I think there's a real strength in that, as you say, provided it is contained, because you can keep giving as if from an ocean. You still are a human person. You may have one foot in it, but there is an incredible strength that comes from being able to relate to others and have compassion for people and see different perspectives. And one of the misconceptions that came to my mind was passivity, like as if, like, you're kind of a hippy dippy flower child, and so you'll just be a
Yes.
pushover. Absolutely not. And I think that came through really strongly in what you first said as well, around, like, when pushed, you can absolutely push back. So, and
Hmm.
that's because I think there is inherent strength, and provided it's integrated with, the other
Yeah.
parts of the chart and the contrasting archetypal elements as well.
Hmm.
I was wondering, and this kind of links back to something you mentioned earlier as well. But I was thinking about this Jupiter in Cancer transit, and obviously that's been,
Hmm.
that's your kind of moon's ruler, and it's in this mutual reception. How have you found that transit to be?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So as I said earlier, I'm a Virgo rising. I do use whole signs, so my 11th house is Cancer. And so for me, this Jupiter in Cancer transit has been all about community, like the essence of community, um, finding community abroad because my natal Jupiter is in the ninth house, as well as being able to lean on my community and kind of like almost feeling like they're more like my family than my family, especially during this time because I'm thousands of miles away from home. I don't have that same support system as I did back in the States. And so it's really been this process of learning like how to open myself back up to build new relationships, to build new community, to connect with people and, common interests, 11th house, common goals, shared values. And
Mm.
it was tough at first, especially I have language barriers here where I am,
Mm.
it can be difficult to communicate sometimes, and I had to push past that, challenge myself, learn new language, learn new culture, and now I feel like I'm finally like settling in right as this retrograde, has come to an end.
I absolutely love that. And isn't how perfect, because Jupiter finds its joy in the 11th house, doesn't it, as well? So that
Mhm.
those magnanimous aspects are coming through. I mean, it's not necessarily a walk in the park, but there's definitely, it sounds
Yeah,
like some of that benevolence and that hopes and wishes kind of dimension is coming through.
absolutely. Yeah. So overall though, I mean it's been just a wonderful transit. I feel like people kind of hype up any of like the exaltations whenever we have them transit wise. And so was it exactly what I was expecting? No, but one thing I'll say about me is that my Jupiter, I have a natal Jupiter retrograde. Jupiter transits never go how I think they're gonna go.
Oh.
Never. But they always end up, it's like it doesn't go how I think, but it ends up better than I expected. Very Jupiter,
Ah.
right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I love that. And I love that you've been finding community outside of like what society deems community, that you can decide where you belong. Like that sense of
Yeah.
belonging that you have with Cancer is so strong when Jupiter's there. And like you said, Helen, having it in its house of joy and exalted. I don't think Jupiter is always as obvious as you would expect it to be, because you think, oh, it's Jupiter,
Hmm.
it's going to be big, it's going to be this, it's going to. Sometimes it's much more subtle, and it can be shifts in just our mindset and beliefs about things that's what
Yeah.
I'm finding. Like, I'm just thinking about, okay, I think
Hmm.
about that differently now. And it doesn't have to be an external kind of change, it's more internal. And obviously, I've got Jupiter in the 12th house at the moment, so it is more internal. But I think sometimes Jupiter can
Uh-huh.
just be how are our beliefs internally changing about
That's
something?
such a really good point that you bring up because like especially when I first came abroad when the Jupiter and Cancer transit first started, my mindset definitely was completely different in the sense of like, oh my God, okay, I'm abroad, like I'm doing it. How am I gonna like pay for anything? Am I gonna get the visa? Is this gonna work out?
Mm.
And so it's so interesting what you said because now I'm looking back at everything and I'm like, wow, like now I'm just like, and I also think it's a cultural thing, like just being in Thailand, because it's very like relaxed too,
Mhm.
where I used to stress about things so much where now I'm like, it'll work out. It'll be fine. I'm gonna go take a walk or I'm gonna go to the park. Like it's
Yeah.
everything's fine, And in Thailand, we say sabai sabai. So
Ah.
just chilling out and trusting the process. That's the difference between the start of the
Mhm.
Jupiter and Cancer transit for me versus, now that we're coming towards the end of it.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Yeah, so you just got like more self-belief and just belief that it'll work out in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that community is there to support me along the way too.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
No, no, that sounds so interesting. Because I was going to ask you about lunar remediations and talismans, but
Uh,
you've mentioned an ancestral altar a few times, and I'm just like so interested. So I'd love to hear a little bit
yeah.
about your altar, but also have you done any kind of lunar remediations or worn talismans in any way to kind of
Yeah, good
work?
question. So I got a Vedic astrology reading like years ago, and I think my moon was in Shatabisha. I'm probably butchering that name, but that was the nakshatra that my moon was in. And one of the remediations that he said that would be really, really good for me is like going and taking a swim, which I'm already a swimmer, so it was like perfect for me. But early in the morning as it's rising, because for me, of course, I was born just as the sun was rising. I have, depending on if you look at whole signs or Placidus, my sun's either in the first or the 12th house. But yeah, so that was one of the remediations that he gave me. But it's interesting that you mentioned the ancestral altar because I found that to be the most useful. And for me especially, so my lineage, my background, I come from a matriarchal lineage. So I ended up doing like my DNA testing. Obviously, I'm Black American, so I had to like go and pay to find out where I'm from, but it's all good. And so I found out that my ancestors are from Bioko Island on my mom's side of the family. Did a whole bunch of research about it and found out that it's actually a matriarchal society, which made so much sense for me, like especially being a moon in Pisces, square Pluto, because my life, like when I think of all of the, I wouldn't say authoritative figures, but the people who've nurtured me, the people who've like really raised me, it's been strong women, very like opinionated women, like women, or just feminine energies who are like warriors almost, like who really stand in their power, stand in their truth. And so bringing that back to my ancestral altar, so it's so special to me because the people on my altar are all women, all of the matriarchs of my family.
Mm,
I was blessed enough to meet both of my great grandmothers on my mom's
mm.
side again. So like there's just this strong pull and connection to the maternal side of the family. So that's really what my altar is based on. And yeah, I definitely go to the water all the time, pick like little seashells from the beach, put them on my altar. My altar is very water based. Water is at the center of it. So yeah, I love my altar. And it's so funny because Thailand as well. It's so great living here because spirituality, water, cleansing, like those are also very fundamental aspects of the culture. So I feel like I'm constantly like working towards thinking of my moon, thinking of ways to improve, like, have balance, and just be connected to myself and my intuition. So yeah, I love my altar for sure.
Thank you for sharing. I've got into altars recently and just blown away by the power of them. So I love that you've been able to work with that with intention. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about your fourth house is Sagittarius.
Yeah. And
So
Pluto is there.
so
Mhm.
the ruler of your fourth house is in the ninth, which is
Yes.
interesting
Yes.
that you've got that
Mhm.
kind of link there. And I don't know if your IC floats into the third or fifth, or if it's situated in the fourth as well.
It's fourth. Yeah.
It's fourth. So yes,
Hmm.
you've got the ruler of your IC in the ninth. So it makes sense that you're kind of connecting to your ancestors, but not in the place where you were born, like somewhere different. Like you're doing
Yeah.
it in Thailand,
Hmm.
and you've got Thailand and Thai. I'm just like thinking of all these different like overlaps. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it sounds great.
I have a question for you guys though. So have either of you like worked with talismans especially or like worn them for lunar remediations?
No, I've not actually worn or done any kind of talisman's work, although I would love to get involved in it. What I'm currently doing is altars. So I've got a Mars and a Venus altar because they're both falling in
Mhm.
my chart, and I've been working with
Mhm.
intention with those. But
Mhm.
I would love to get a lunar talisman because I think because the moon obviously changes signs every 2.5 days. You've got so much going on with the moon. I feel like a talisman would really help kind of strengthen the relationship. I think as astrologers, having that intentional relationship with the planets and the luminaries is such an important part of the work that we do.
I
But no,
agree.
I don't have any kind of direct experience. Helen, do you have any?
No, I'd love to try a talisman. I've got a fallen moon, and that's definitely very prominent in the makeup of my chart as in contrast to other things, and it's definitely very powerful. I do tend to things like I wear like pearl earrings on a
Cool.
Monday, as it is today, and also I tend to kind of try and wear white and have like glass things around, especially on a Monday. But I haven't, I probably should be more systematic with it. I think I'd definitely like to explore that just because certainly it's not to say I don't get strength from that fallen moon and that there's not positive aspects to it, but it is a challenging one. So I would love to try, a proper manic, piece of practice, I suppose, magic that people use the traditional, and for anyone listening who's not aware of this at all, I don't know much about it, but they're created on a very specific chart, aren't they, to kind of channel the energy. And yeah, I'd love to experience what it's like. I mean, I suppose by progression, I have had a progressed moon in Taurus, which has been obviously exalted, so, and opposite the Scorpio moon, so that's maybe given me a bit of a taste of what it might be like. But it's in Gemini now, so we kind of passed that kind of time. But yeah, I'd love to know what it's like not to have a fallen moon, and I don't know if it would quite give me that, but I'd definitely be curious to see if it would mitigate the challenges there.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that. I love that
absolutely.
you're wearing these little pearl earrings. Yeah, I think even just working consciously with the planetary days, like you said, like today's the moon, like what can we do that actually honors the moon and honors ourselves, through nourishment, through relaxation, through connecting, through others. I think there's lots that you can just
Yeah.
do without having to do too much. I think that's the beauty of working with, the planets in that way. There's so many little things that you can do from day to day. And so do you live quite close to the ocean, Ty? Are you quite close to it where you are?
So not in Bangkok, but I can access it pretty easily. Like I was just in Phuket,
Oh,
down
nice.
south a couple of weeks ago, so I definitely enjoyed just, being at the water. I love water. I've always loved water since I can remember.
Mhm.
It just comes so naturally to me, and like I really lo loved and enjoyed my time when I was, a swimmer as well. So yeah, I don't live quite by the ocean, but I definitely have like just such a love and appreciation for water. And I try to, go to the ocean as much as I can, as much as
Mhm.
I am able to.
And I think all of that takes us kind of quite well into the last question that I wanted to ask was around just for, I guess, for us, but also for anyone listening, um, with your sort of intimate knowledge of having a Pisces moon, would, would you have any practical tips to sort of working with either the Pisces moon transits, or the new moon coming up? What are any kind of top
Mhm.
tips that people can do relatively easily?
Mhm. That's really good. A few things, like I mentioned earlier. Well, before I mention that one, something super easy that most people don't think about, go get a pedicure. Literally, like such good remediation if you're struggling or if you found that Pisces moons are a little bit challenging for you. Get a pedicure. Pisces does roll over the feet. It's gonna be relaxing for you. Also, it releases toxins, stress. We have pressure points on the feet. It's really good. The second thing, go for a swim if you can, but specifically the ocean, right? Salty kind of water would be more Cancer. So I know the ocean is pretty salty, usually speaking, but you go to a lake too. You could go to waterfall if you want to, but the ocean also works for Pisces. Um, I'm trying to think, is there anything else for working with Pisces moons? Transit wise. Oh, yes. It's a great time to create as well, I found, or do like spiritual work, especially if you're someone who channels, someone who's like a medium, someone again who's like you've got 1 foot in the material, 1 foot in the spiritual. Pisces moons are really, really good for any of those types of things. And I think the last thing that I would say, funny enough, always, of course, be very mindful, be very careful about this. But for those who like to microdose or, work with shrooms or, work with things like that and, safe controlled spaces and environments, Pisces moons can. I'm saying can because everyone is like very, very different, especially when it comes to working with substances. I have to like really, point that out
Mhm.
there, but it can be good for that too. But of course, in safe, controlled spaces and environments with trusted people, and make sure you do lots of research first, consult with a doctor first, all those kinds of things. Safety first, guys, if you're going to be taking
Yes. I
substances.
love that. Very responsible advice there. I really like your advice around pedicures. I think that's a really nice way to connect. And you're right, there's so much toxins that can be kind of released from there, like reflexology
Mhm.
even. I think I'm actually gonna do an at-home pedicure this week because of your tip. Because I was thinking I do need to do one, and the Pisces moon feels like the perfect platform to do that. So that's a really
Oh, yeah.
really good tip. Yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah, it does. And I wonder as well, when you were talking about channeling work and things, and do you think for people like Tara and myself who work with Reiki, do you think it's a particularly good time? I suppose we could empirically
Yeah,
test that, just
absolutely.
see if it comes through kind of more strongly, or it might be a good time to send it over distances, just because there is that maybe that interconnectedness.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely test that out. I have to say, like, I haven't exactly tracked when I've done spiritual work during Pisces moons. Now I'm going to, actually, because I'm very intrigued like by this. But I have tracked when like I've microdosed
Mm,
during Pisces moons, and I have found it to be like I've had more profound like messages come through, or like channeling, or just clarity
mm,
when I did it during a Pisces moon versus like when I've microdosed during an Aries moon. Absolutely crazy experience, for example. So yeah, definitely good
yeah.
for energy work, body work, any of those different types of things where just energy is moving, things that are unseen are happening, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
sounds like Reiki's a good, I think you're right, Helen. I might try and do a bit more kind of Reiki focused work around the new moon and just see how that kind of works. I think mixing and blending different practices like Reiki and astrology are just so interesting to me. Last week I sent some distant Reiki to Helen, but I incorporated it with my Venus altar and did it during Venus hour. And I think that is just so nice to be able to have these complementary therapies that actually are very, they build off each other. So I think, yeah, I'm looking forward to this new moon in a strange way, even though I feel like I've been, yeah, drowning and but in a cleansing way. It's almost like you are submerged through these emotions that are quite deep and intense. But when you come out the other side, you do have this like clarity around it as well, even if it doesn't feel clear right now. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. And that's what I feel like Pisces is all about. It doesn't quite make sense, but you just have to feel your way through it, you know. Very
yeah,
Piscean.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's
definitely.
that the particular timing with the very end of the last Pisces moon before Aries season, really. And so I think
Mhm.
I think this is giving me some ideas of how to kind of mark that and make the most of the energies, because it is, I feel like there's a lot in what you said, Tara, about you're starting to feel like we're kind of coming through what has
Mhm.
been a very complex and confusing and in some ways challenging time. And there's always that symbolic moment of rebirth is just around the corner when we're at 28 Pisces, or when the sun in particular is at 28 Pisces. So I think I'm going to use some of these tips to sort of consolidate and reflect and sort of focus on a bit of energetic healing as we step
Mhm.
into a new year.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I love, all of the information that, you guys have touched on today as well. And I have a lot to think about as it pertains to just how to work with Pisces moons in the future, and how to understand the energy better. Because even though I am a Pisces moon, again, sometimes with Pisces, a lot of things can go over our head at the
Hmm.
same time that we're not aware of, that we don't realize. And so you guys have definitely made me more aware of certain things that I want to incorporate better into my routines, and just, and how I exude my Piscean energy.
Yeah, which has been beautiful to have you on and to have that energy. I think it's been, yeah, definitely needed. And although Mercury had other plans for us last week, so just to let listeners know, we were meant to record this last week, but Mercury was like, no. So here we are. And I feel like, yeah, it's always works out in the right way, because I feel like this is a good energy. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And yeah, I think it's interesting that you're on this kind of international podcast while you're abroad and you've got all this like ninth
I
house energy.
know.
Yeah.
But like the UK is always going to be home for me. So, I have ancestry based there as well, and I've always felt like the UK is home. So, if you don't know, Helen, I lived in the UK for 3 years. That's where I went to uni. But the pandemic, when Uranus entered my ninth house, And it formed a conjunction with my natal Jupiter, actually. My Jupiter's at 4 degrees of Taurus. That's literally when I left
Wow.
the UK. Yeah, I was just there not that long ago. And I think I have my moon IC line is going through the
Interesting.
UK as well. So yeah, I feel very connected to that place. It's like home for me. I hope one day I'll come back and live there again.
Yes. And hopefully we can, yeah,
Great.
arrange a meetup because that would be so nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
meet in
absolutely.
person.
This year for
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. It's been so lovely speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you all for having me like so much. I had a great time and yeah, like I love talking with other astrologers. It definitely helps me to, just dive further into my
Mhm.
practice, question things, research things further. So I love that.
Me too. And
Great.
yeah, thanks again. It's been a really enjoyable conversation.
No, it has.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us today and sharing all of your wonderful insights. How can people find out more about your work?
Yes, so you can visit my website, dashofthewoo.com, and click the Astro tab, or you can follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Heaux, no one cares, CURRR. That's 3 R's. So yeah, that's where you can find me. I also will be relaunching my YouTube. I had a YouTube channel that I posted like some astrology videos back in 2020, 2021, but life just got really, really busy and I ended up diving, really deep into my business. So I didn't have time, but now I'm back at it and I'm gonna have some new astrology and travel astrology videos coming up
Ooh.
soon. So
That sounds
yes.
very exciting. Oh, great. Now
Yeah.
I'm glad you're revamping your YouTube, and I'll definitely be tuning in for sure. So to our listeners, as always, thank you for listening and for bringing your own energy and attention to this topic. We'll see you next time when we continue with the moon in Aries. Bye. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.